May is the hottest month in India, a time when schools are out and kids learn various ways to cope with the stifling heat, like sharing this muddy pond with the water buffalo.
It is too hot inside. The water has stopped coming to our house. My mother told me to go to the pond and take a bath.
For many mothers, the daily routine makes it difficult to escape.
It's really hot here. When I cook, I get flashes of heat from the stove. It's hot even in the shade.
Temperatures like these are not unusual for May, but this year they came early, really early, and across a much wider swath of the country.
It is the hottest April in 122 years. March was the hottest March in 122 years.
I met Urmi Goswami, a journalist covering climate issues for India's Economic Times in one of Delhi's poorer neighborhoods.
It is getting hotter. You're building more, there are more cars on the street. There are all kinds of other things that are happening. Water stress is increasing. So clearly the factors that add to your discomfort are growing. I mean, just look around. You'll see the kind of housing that you have. It's not really conducive to any weather.
Only about a tenth of Indian households have access to air conditioning, but the sharp spike in electricity demand due to the heat wave has caused rolling blackouts. That stops the ceiling fans, sometimes for hours each day, the one coping mechanism for many lower-income people. The heat has been particularly stressful for those who labor outdoors.
I was working every day last week, even though it was making me sick. My eyes were getting red. That's why I stopped working today.
It's hard to measure the full toll on human health from all of this heat. Several dozen deaths have been reported as a direct result of heat stroke, but that doesn't take into account the many deaths that go unrecorded and long-term consequences of sustained heat exposure, like cardiovascular disease, respiratory distress, and liver and kidney failure.
The government has implemented early weather warnings that have allowed local municipalities to provide shelter, water, and relief. But for many day laborers in India's economy, to get paid, they have to go to work.
It's severely hot. If I work 10 minutes, I have to sit for half an hour to take a rest. It's so severely hot, I feel like I could faint.
Extreme heat, more than anything else, impacts productivity. And that itself is an issue when it comes to economic output.
That's especially true and worrying in agriculture, where the searing temperatures damaged this spring's wheat crop. At this market just outside Delhi, farmer Raghubir Singh Khatri showed us the difference between this year's crop and the last year's.
If it wasn't for the extreme heat in March, we would have had 20% more harvest. The grains are smaller this year. If temperatures were cooler, they would have looked bigger, like these.
That definitely has an impact on the quality of the production and the nutrition aspect of the wheat. And I think that will affect sale value of the crop itself.
Suricha Badwal, a climate scientist at the Energy and Resources Institute in Delhi, says there's no imminent danger of food shortages. India still has substantial reserve stocks and a free food distribution for low-income households that began during the pandemic. But as India and so many countries lurch from one extreme weather event to the next, Badwal says these become ever louder warnings of a climate catastrophe absent global action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
So no country is spared from the ill effects of the consequences of climate change, whether it's floods or cyclones or tornadoes or storm surges or heat waves. Today we are facing it. So we do need very stringent action to make sure that we are not converting this world into an uninhabitable place to live in.
Yet India's heat wave illustrates the difficulties countries have in living up to their goals to transition to cleaner energy, says journalist Goswami.
Look what happens at the first sign of a crisis. You go running back to what you know best to meet your demand, what you can do quickly.
Which is coal.
Which is coal. Is the transition easy? No. Is it necessary? It's essential. It's critical.
Today, 70% of India's power supply comes from coal, and it's had to step up production and imports of the polluting fuel to cope with the surge in heatwave-driven demand. On a more hopeful note, the June monsoon is forecast to be normal this year. For 1 billion people across the subcontinent, June and that rain cannot come quickly enough.